So London Dungeon, as I said, on the left hand side. Nearest station London Bridge, which is here. And this is also the station that you would need if you wanted to visit Southwark Cathedral. In regards to literature, if any of you are studying literature while you're here, this is where John Gower, or Morrell Gower, the 14th century writer who wrote in English, is buried. It's also where the brother of William Shakespeare, the 16th, early 17th century playwright, is buried. Edmund Shakespeare died here in 1607. There's a memorial to John Harvard, who founded Harvard, Massachusetts. He was a local. He emigrated in 1637 and died the following year. But he left all his books and half his money to a little college which took the name Harvard, Massachusetts. And it's also where you'll find two writers. One collaborated with Shakespeare. His name was John Fletcher. The other was slightly later. He collaborated with Fletcher, and his name was Philip Massinger. So they're all buried in Southwark Cathedral.
Drive so close here.
So as we come, whoa,
Let's hit that guy.
as we come round, you will see Southwark Cathedral on your right hand side. As an individual it's free to visit. As a group it actually costs money, but as an individual it's free. And they have a little refectory at the back as well. Within the cathedral they did an archaeological dig here a few years ago, and they've found Roman pavements. There was a Roman villa here because they found what looks like a Roman god that was sort of still in the ground, a statue. There were also kilns, because this is where the Dutch potters came and started creating Delftware as well, as in Holland, that blue and white pottery. You've also got Southwark glazers, would be centred here from the 1500s onwards. Why? You're outside the authority of the City of London. If you're on this side of London Bridge, you're outside the rules of the city. Therefore, you have workers who do not belong to the guilds, these early trade unions. They settle in this area, and most of them tend to be migrants from what we call the Low Countries, so from the Netherlands, from Holland, from Belgium, and they settle in this part of London. Now, this was the main road heading southwards out of London. All the pubs, as you went down, if you can imagine, there were more than 23 pubs or inns along here, including the White Hart, the King's Head, the Tabard Inn, which became very famous because of the writings of Geoffrey Chaucer, the 14th century writer who wrote the Canterbury Tales, where all the pilgrims set out from the Tabard to make their way to Canterbury Cathedral to go on pilgrimage to the tomb of Thomas Becket, the Archbishop who was murdered in his own cathedral in 1170 and was made a saint in the Catholic Church. They're down here. So you've got all these different inns. One of them still survives, the George Inn. If you go to the George, it's the only galleried inn in London. So they were very early theatres. They're three sides of a building around a central courtyard opening up onto Barrow High Street itself. And it's where actors would play within the galleried inn, so you could actually go along and watch from the galleries, and they'd be in the courtyard. You'd also take carriages, coaches out to different parts of the country from here. So different pub would be a different part of the country. So if you wanted to go to Portsmouth, you go to the White Hart. If you wanted to go to Canterbury, you go to the Tabard. So various pubs to different areas. The building work you can see that's going on the right is all to do with a new crossrail that's being put up. And if you look over the top of the green fencing you've got here, you can just make out a yellow brick building that's curved on your right. That's the Globe, and that is where Bridget Jones actually lives. In the movie, that's the home of Bridget Jones. There's a little, just down Beadle Street, there is Beadle's, which is a cheese and wine shop, but in the movie it's where Hugh Grant and Colin Firth have their big punch-up in the street. So they do a lot of filming in this part of London. But this was a way that would take you out, as I said, down to the south. If you arrived in London, and because London Bridge was the only bridge until the 18th century, you'd be met with a warning as you arrived at London Bridge, because over the gatehouse there would have been the heads of traitors. And if you were executed for treason, your head would have been parboiled in salt and put on a spike here at London Bridge, where it would stay till it fell down. So you can imagine people like William Wallace, the Scotsman, executed in 1305. 1535, you would have had Bishop John Fisher, as well as Sir Thomas More's heads being here. 1542, you had the head of Thomas Culpeper, the lover of Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife. She was beheaded at the Tower. Culpeper was beheaded. He was lucky. Her other lover, Francis Derringham, was a commoner, so he was hung, drawn, quartered and castrated while still alive. Whoa. So, painful. So down to the right, we'll take you down to Borough Market, which, as I said, So here on your right is the National Theatre, the Olivier, the Cottesloe and the Littleton. Just finished here this month was Danny Boyle's Frankenstein. Danny Boyle, of course, the director of 127 Hours, Slumdog Millionaire. It starred Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, and it was sold out. It's really difficult to get tickets for. So this was the National Theatre, and if you look off to the right, you've got the Film Movie Museum. That's just here on your right hand side, and then the Royal Festival Hall, which is the reminder of the Festival of Britain, which opened in 1951. It was an end of austerity, the end of rationing. This is the only building to survive from the Festival of Britain. So this here on your right hand side, you can see they're celebrating the Festival of Britain because of course it was 60 years ago. So all different things, lots of food, lots of bits and pieces on sale, all to celebrate the Festival of Britain, the end of austerity. If you like places to eat, they've got lots of restaurants along the back here, but the #1 paying tourist site in London is on your right hand side. This is the EDF Experience. It is the Eye, as we call it. It'll take you 450 feet above London in one of those pods. There are 32 pods, 25 people in each. It'll take you 450 feet above London, and on a good day you can see 20 miles in each direction. It was put up to celebrate the millennium, the year 2000, but it was only supposed to be here for 5 years. It's now 2011, and so what do we have? It's still here. So as I said, it's the #1 tourist site in London.
It's the London Eye, and it is huge. I can't get close because you can't see it. You're going this way. It's a pretty view in the trees. It is very huge.
Our local hospital. As we come along here onto Westminster Bridge, immediately on your left you'll have Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, the large clock tower that everybody calls Big Ben after the bell within the tower itself. So if you look immediately right, you'll see the Eye again that you saw earlier, and you look immediately left, you've got Parliament. At this end, Big Ben and the clock tower. It's coming up for 4 o'clock, and then off to the far side of the building you've got the Victoria Tower, or the Sovereign's Entrance. The red and white, green and white awnings are the restaurants. Red and white for the Lords, green and white for the Commons. 650 elected members of Parliament. At the far side, over 800 unelected members of the House of Lords. On the right, the woman in the statue, Boudica, in her chariot, the Queen of the Iceni, that warrior queen who destroyed not just London, but also the cities of St Albans and Colchester in her rampage against the Romans. When her husband, who was a client king, Prasutagus, died, he left half his lands to his wife, Boudica, the other half to the Roman Emperor Nero. The problem being is the Romans didn't recognise women as holding lands. They would have taken everything for themselves. Both her daughters were assaulted, she was beaten, and she decided to wage war on the Romans. And so she burnt down 3 of their cities and murdered hundreds of citizens before finally taking poison after she was defeated at her final battle. You can hear Big Ben. If you've got really good hearing, you'll hear Big Ben now striking 4 o'clock. We're coming into Parliament Square, and so the building on your left, the work of Sir Charles Barry and Augustus Welby Northmore Pugin. Barry was actually born this day back in 1795, believe it or not. As we come round, the little parish church of St Margaret's on our left hand side. Behind it, more importantly, is Westminster Abbey. Now the Abbey is the most important church in London. This Abbey is the second on the site, built in 1245, completed when you look at the White Towers by the 1720s. It's here that every monarch has been crowned in this Abbey or the previous Abbey on the site since 1066, 38 in total. The only English king to be made a saint, Edward the Confessor, is buried here. You'll have 17 monarchs, reigning monarchs, buried in the Abbey, the last one King George II in 1760, after which it was declared full. It's also last month where a little wedding took place, the wedding of Prince William to Catherine Middleton. So that's where the wedding took place as well, on the 29th of April last month. It's also where we have scientists, men of letters. So scientists include Sir Isaac Newton, who came up with gravity. You've got Charles Darwin, his Origin of the Species. The men of letters include Sir Geoffrey Chaucer, Charles Dickens, and Thomas Hardy, who wrote Tess of the D'Urbervilles, amongst others. So what we're going to try and do is park here. We'll give you quick 5 minutes, if I can say so, once we're parked. If you just want to walk to the top of the street, and you can take some photographs of Westminster Abbey and Big Ben, you'll be able to see from there as well. So if you can do 5 minutes.